Meditations with Ryan Slomak.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to episode 47 of Meditations. I'm your host, Ryan Slomak, and this is a show dedicated to making space for conversations with interesting people just to see what we can learn along the way. Or, in layman's terms, it's a long-form interview show where we talk with creatives and entrepreneurs and just really curious people to hear their backstories. Today, we are talking with somebody who has traveled a great long distance in order to make her way to central New York. We're talking with Jessica Montgomery, originally hailing from Oklahoma, making her way to Syracuse a few years ago to just showcase and share her amazing photography talents. Whether you're looking at product imagery for places like 1911, or you're looking at the stories being told with food for photography for places like Cake Bar or Three Lives, or maybe you're somebody who's a fan of the movie industry and Kevin Smith and Jason Mewes mean something to you. She's a personal photographer for those individuals, but she expands so much further than her work behind the camera. Jessica is a natural storyteller, a brilliant art director, a master of just different media, a master of color theory, and I'm really excited to dig in and share just the magic that she is able to create and the creative processes that go into that. So without further ado, let's go chat with Jessica Montgomery. Jessica Montgomery, photographer of all things Central New York. Thank you so much for being on the show and inviting me to Stay Fresh headquarters and into your studio for this. It's an honor.
You're so welcome. Thanks for being here.
So you're so directly tied to Central New York, and we just talked about the fact that your 7-year anniversary of moving here is coming up.
Yeah.
But you're an Oklahoman. Is that the term?
Yeah. Yes. I think so. I don't know. I always refer to people from Oklahoma as like my Oklahomies. So I think Oklahoman is correct.
Awesome. And, you were born, from what I understand, born in Texas, and at the age of 2 moved to Oklahoma.
Yes.
And were you in Oklahoma City?
Yes. Yeah. Very like central Oklahoma City.
Okay. So tell us about growing up in Oklahoma. Like, what was the culture of your household like, and what kind of things did you do for fun?
So growing up in Oklahoma, one of the things is like, it's so much warmer there. Like the weather is a lot different than Syracuse. And so it's in the summers, it's really, really, really hot. So like growing up in the summertime, like to survive in Oklahoma, you basically have to live in the water, like in the summer, or because air conditioning is expensive. So I spent a lot of my childhood summers just playing in the water. Like we'd go camping, swim in the lakes, play in the sprinkler out in the back, like, be in the pool. I don't know. The culture is very, at least my experience. I know Oklahoma City is a pretty big city, so I don't want to speak like as a blanket for everybody's experience.
You don't want to talk about all the Oklahomies at once. Yeah.
Right. But my experience was that it is, it's in the Bible Belt. It's very conservative. And those things tend to make their way into your everyday life and to part of the culture. And, I grew up going to church, and everybody that I knew went to church. All of my friends went to church. As I grew up and like started getting jobs, most of my employers, like in their like business statements in their like job culture, would mention God. And so moving away from that and like experiencing other cultures and religions has been really interesting to me, because not everybody grew up like with Jesus front and center every single day of their life. I personally really have benefited from moving away from that and getting to experience other people's ideology and religion and thought processes. And
Well, let's jump into another part of your childhood, which I think is really interesting, is that, I've seen in different interviews, you've said, like, I was basically born with a camera. And at the age of 3, your parents got you a Susie Snapshot doll.
Yes.
Which, can you just tell us a little bit about what that product was?
Yeah. So actually, like, I have her next door, sitting behind my desk. So she's like maybe a foot tall, maybe a foot and a half tall. And she's got joints, and so she's a doll. And she has a choker necklace that has a sensor in it. And she came with a camera, and like the camera would have a flash. And so the sensor would be triggered by the light from the flash. And every time the flash would go off, she would move. Like she would like rotate her arms or her head, or and so she'd go into these different poses. And so it was like, I mean, she's a little model, and she came with accessories. You could brush her hair, change your hair bows, things like that. But I personally had a lot more fun with the camera than the doll, and I would just like, because it clicks, and then you can wind it like there's film in it, and so it makes this cool like noise. And there's not film in it, but like I was obsessed with this camera, and I was like always pretending to take pictures of everybody and everything.
I get a kick out of it because I think that there's something about, and we'll get into this later about making media, but like there's something about, everyone talks about like, oh, analog and physical media and like what this means. But the tactile nature of these things and the sensory components like truly are something that like elevates the way in which you're creating things.
Yes.
So like at the age of 3, discovering that like, I like this sensation. Yeah. Is a really unique way to fall in love with photography.
Yeah. And like, I actually, I rented a mirrorless camera about a year ago just to see what it was about. And like, it has the functionality to make no noise at all. And it weirded me out. I was like, I can't, I need the noise. I need the shutter sound. Like I have to have some indicator that I just took a photo, and so I had to like turn on the sounds. Like it has an option to turn the sounds on, but yeah.
There's some that's hysterical. So the in regards to the sort of the analog nature, though, Susie Snapshot, like you fall in love with the accessory and the photography of her, and then a year later, at the age of 4, your parents get you a 110mm camera.
Yes.
And I'm curious about like. For those who are listening who don't understand that, like, you couldn't always just take all the pictures you wanted because film was like a hot commodity.
Right.
What kind of stuff was 4-year-old Jessica Montgomery shooting with her 110 camera?
Oh my God. So my mom kept she like developed and kept my first roll of film. And it is the funniest thing. Oh my God. So there's my favorite photo in this album. There's a lot of photos of like the cat and the dog and like the flowers in the backyard. A lot of photos where I was obviously like in movement because there's like that blur, like that panning blur, but there's this one photo of my mom and my dad and my sister. And I had them standing out in the backyard in the garden, all holding a vegetable from our garden. And like, it's very like American Gothic, like just straight faced, your shoulders to the camera in a line, and it is hysterical to me. And then so I did manage to get their heads in the frame, but then there's a whole lot of photos of them like with their heads cut off, and because I was learning.
You were 4.
I was 4, yeah. But yeah, that one family photo of them with the vegetables is just, it's great.
I love it. What was the other than photography though, as a kid, what other personal interests? Other than photography and being a mermaid, apparently. Like,
oh yeah.
What were the other personal interests that you really had, as a kid and moving into your teenage years?
I was very obsessed with mermaids. I did a lot of drawing. I also like had this really cool like playhouse that my dad had put together for me in the backyard. I did a lot of pretend, I was in my head a lot. I was pretending a lot of different stories. And we had this really cool tree. I think it was an apricot tree, but it was like, it never like produced fruit. And I think there was something wrong with it because it was like, it didn't go up. It like spread out across the ground. And so like the branches would almost like dip and like touch the ground in certain spots. And I would go and climb in that and have all kinds of adventures. Just sit and read. And then I was a Barbie girl. I did collect all of the Barbies. I had 2 giant like floor to ceiling bookshelves that my mom painted for me, and we displayed all of my Barbies. They didn't just go in a box. Like, we didn't just throw them in the closet. They were displayed, and they were properly dressed, and their hair was brushed, and they were sitting pretty on the bookshelves. And I also did a lot of dress up, a lot of pretending. I like spent a lot of time by myself, and my sister. She was always with me. But my mom would take us. We'd go to garage sales, and we'd like buy these beautiful dresses that, you know, were way too big for me because I was a child. They were like adult dresses, but like I would dress up, and I still have one of them actually that I would always play dress up in. And one of these days I want to do like a photo series of a bunch of different models in that dress in different like situations. So yeah, that was me as a kid.
That sounds really fun. And I think that like, I mean, just as I think about you, you know, like the term photographer does not encapsulate you. And again, we'll talk about this as we move forward. But like that spending time in your headspace and figuring out different ways to like tell the same story or like reuse a prop to tell a new story with it or whatever. It's like this imaginative training ground for your like future photographer brain.
Yes, I did a lot of imagining. And I just, you know, I was always the awkward kid. I had some friends, like I had a best friend. Her name was also Jessica. And, you know, I would have each year I would have a favorite friend from school, you know. But in general, I spent a lot of time by myself because I was always very awkward and the kids picked on me. And even like up through high school, I had like my best friends and my group of friends. But in general, I was not a social butterfly for sure.
Fascinating. So tell me about your relationship with photography as you got older, though. Like, how did that play a role in your adventures and your creative modes?
Okay. Yeah. So, you know, growing up, my dad, I still have his camera. He had a 35 millimeter Canon. You know, he would hand me his camera when we'd be on vacation, and he was teaching me. My mom also was like really good at photography. I think my dad enjoyed it more, but my mom, I think, was better at it. And, you know, so he was teaching me how to use the manual focus and like how to change all the manual settings on the camera. And, you know, that it was an expensive camera, so it was a special occasion camera. You know, I'd get to use that one just once in a while. And then when I got into high school, I got into the yearbook, into the journalism branch of, I did yearbook and newspaper. And I also took my first photography class in high school. And it was a film photography class. You know, I had learned how to use a camera, and I was pretty good at that kind of thing. But the developing, like getting the film out of the camera and like developing it yourself in the darkroom, that was really, really challenging for me. And I actually almost quit because you know, learning photography at home, we would always just package up the film and send it out and get it developed. Thank God I had this friend, Alan. He taught me how to load film onto the reel so that I could develop it, because I could not get past, because you have to load it in the dark so you can't see what you're doing. And I'm not a super coordinated individual. If anybody knows me, they know that's an understatement. I was like bawling. It was like 3 or 4 assignments in that I had just not turned in because I kept ruining my film because I couldn't get it onto the reel correctly to develop it. And I was ready to just go to the counselor and be like, I give up, put me in a different class, you know? And Alan was like, absolutely not. Like, we're figuring this out. And so he would go after school. He stayed with me after school, and he would go into the closet with me and he would like calm me down and walk me through it. So once I figured out how to get on that damn reel, everything else was piece of cake. By the time I was a senior in high school, I was the editor-in-chief of the high school yearbook staff. Well, co-editor. There were two of us. And I also, like, my first job in high school, I was the receptionist for a portrait studio. And so I learned a lot. I watched and, learned a lot there. When it was time for college, I actually started out as an art major. I didn't start out as a photography major.
I want to get to college in shortly
Okay.
To talk about more Oklahomies. But two questions just while we stay in this sort of high school space that are completely unrelated.
Okay.
First question is in regards to, taking on, I'm going to call them leadership roles in the photography space, like, being in charge of things in the yearbook and then also like working at a studio, being a receptionist, things like that. Like, when did you start to see maybe your brain shift a little bit to thinking about like, oh, there are practical applications for this as opposed to this is just a fun thing that I do on the side?
Yeah, I think that Mrs. Waters was responsible for that. The journalism teacher. She was awesome, and she was very I want to say feisty. Like she was honestly the first teacher that ever made me cry. She was the first teacher that ever like criticized me. I was always a straight A student. I was, perfect student. And she was the first teacher that ever offered me any kind of like criticism, and she, I think, saw something in me, and she knew that like she needed to push me out of my comfort zone. And she was the one that kind of like showed me not only like my potential, but just the potential of photography in the world in general.
What kind of feedback was she giving you? Like, what were the things that like, because obviously those lessons stay with you, right?
Yeah.
Like, what were the things that you needed to kind of like up your chops on?
Oh, there's a few things. Oh man. The first one was in like newspaper writing. It wasn't even about photography. It was about writing. And she had me rewrite the same article like 13 times. I just like was bawling, and like I thought she was so mean for like, I was like, it's just a grade. Like, why does it have to be perfect? Like, so what if it's a B? Like, why do I, and she was basically like, you really want to put B work out there for the whole school to see? Like, this is going in the newspaper. We're publishing this. Like, you don't want to put out your best work? She was like, I know that you have it in you. I know that this can be better. And I'm not gonna print it until it's what I know you're capable of. And then there was another time that we were like all gonna be submitting photos, like the class as a whole was gonna be submitting photos for some statewide contest. I don't know. And like I like presented her my photo, and it was like some kind of landscape, like a redbud tree or something like that. And she was just like, no. And I was like, what do you mean no? And she was like, anybody can take that, Jess. She was like, I mean, it's a pretty tree. Like, anybody could take a picture of a pretty tree. Give me something that not anybody could do. I think now, whenever I'm looking at my work, even today, I'll look at photos and I'll be like, Jess, anybody could do that. Give me something better, Yeah, she was... She made me upset a lot, but I think that, growing up and being an adult, like, it's important to be able to recognize that sometimes tough love is love. And, like, she was looking out for me, and I really appreciate, and I'm very thankful for the days that she made me cry, because I'm better now.
I love it. I'm picturing the Mrs. Waters, like angel demon, and then like acceptable, like little characters that float around your brain while you're trying to get stuff done.
Yeah.
And then the unrelated question, which is, you alluded earlier to the sort of conservative nature of Oklahoma and the conservative nature of your household. And one thing that we've talked about and that you've posted about is that the sort of like two main places that you got your sort of ethical landscape from were Jesus and Star Trek.
Yes.
And I want to, before we move on and talk about college, I want to know about your relationship with Star Trek.
Oh my gosh. Okay, I don't let it out into the public very much, but I am a Trekkie. I love Star Trek. My mom also loved Star Trek, and that was one of the things that I was allowed. That was one of the grown-up grown-up television time that I was allowed to be a part of. Because my mom was always very cautious about what we watched as children. And so we would go to bed and then her and my dad would watch grown-up TV. But Star Trek was one of the ones that I got to stay up for. Yeah, I've watched to be fair, I haven't watched a lot of the original Star Trek, which I should, but as a kid, it was hard for me to get into because it was just not the same caliber of special effects and makeup artists, But I've watched all of Voyager, all of TNG, all of Deep Space Nine, multiple times. It's one of my comfort TV shows now. So if I'm having a bad day or whatever, I'll go home and I'll turn on Star Trek.
What is it about that type of programming that has seeped its way into you so much?
They do a really good job of hitting on those hard ethical moments. And a lot of times they leave them open-ended. A lot of times at the end of the episode, you don't know if Captain Janeway made the right decision, And sometimes she makes the wrong decision. And she knows that she made the wrong decision, And it was very, I guess, because a lot of children's content, they're telling you what to think and they're telling you this is how you should behave and this is how you should treat people. Star Trek would hit on those really hard things sometimes, especially around I've been currently rewatching Voyager, so I'll probably reference that more because that's what I'm currently going through again. But around 7 of 9 and the Doctor, who 7 of 9, when they first rescued her from the Borg, she wanted to be Borg. She didn't want to be human. And so it's this hard ethical thing of is humanity so precious that we force it on her, even though she'd prefer to be Borg? And in the end, everybody kind of decides that, she, in the end, she is happier as a human and appreciates what Janeway did for her. But, that was a hard episode to watch. Her crying and wanting to go back to the Borg,
I think it's interesting just in the sense that as we're talking about that, it's a pretty clear lineage to our conversations right now about letting people identify as they want to identify and understanding that as you identify with a specific gender, a specific, racial background or whatever, there is weight to all of those things.
Yeah.
And I think there's just something really beautiful about you as somebody who is constantly thinking about analogies between color and analogies between placement of objects and people and whatever, and then falling in love with a TV show that is all about analogy, and that really forming, obviously that didn't form all your belief systems. We're not saying that Jessica watched a bunch of TV and was this is me.
Right.
But there's clearly especially when you find the thing that comforts you from a media standpoint, oftentimes it's because that is the piece of media that most specifically talks to the values that you want to see in the world.
Right. Yeah. And, the Prime Directive, is a big piece of Star Trek. And, the Prime Directive kind of says, we don't interfere in this other species development. We don't interfere in, we may not understand them. We maybe don't agree with them. We don't necessarily relate to them, but we accept their right to do things their way, and we're not going to interfere just because we think that our way is better and we think that we're correct. And I feel like that is something that I do take with me into everyday life for sure.
I love it. Well, sadly, this is not a Star Trek podcast, but
Okay.
I want to greatly thank you for jumping into that, because I think it's something that has come up in our dialogue on multiple occasions.
Right.
So now jumping back to our Oklahomies, in high school, you talked about the fact that, Mrs. Waters had really kind of pushed you to be something bigger than yourself. And then you eventually went to, you decided to be an art major at, I think, Oklahoma City Community College.
Yeah.
Tell me about that decision and what types of stuff you were studying there.
I got a scholarship for college through the community college, and it was a little bit unique compared to some of the other scholarships out there because it paid, it was going to not only pay for my schooling at the community college, but it would also pay for 2 years at a state university after I graduated from the community college. And it was based off of it was like a time limit. It wasn't like a monetary limit or you get your degree or whatever. It was like you get 2 years at the community college and you get 2 years at an in-state university. And so in my head, I was like, okay, I'm going to get as many degrees as I can in 4 years. And so I got my associate's degree from the community college in 2 years. And most people, that's a 3.5 year, program. But I was taking 15 to 24 hours a semester, which is much more than full time. And I got my associates in visual arts from the community college. It included a couple of photography classes, but it also included sculpting, pottery, screen printing, art history, took some drawing and painting classes. Yeah, it was all very encompassed all of the art. I took that and then I went to the University of Central Oklahoma, where I then started as an art major originally. That was my intention. And I like to joke that they kicked me out of art school, which is only half true. It was more like they politely suggested that I would be happier somewhere else. I took a sophomore portfolio class. You had to pass the class with a 50 to be able to move on to go into your junior year classes. I squeaked by. I passed with a 52. And so technically I could have gone on and finished my art degree, but the teacher, and I can't remember her name, but she was another one that at the time she really hurt my feelings, but looking back on it, she was right, She told me that I had a lot of potential, but that I lacked focus, and that she was suggesting that I not continue in the art program. She said that her observation was that I had an eye. I tended to be better as an observer of art than a creator of art, that my technique was not necessarily the best. I was really mad, and instead of, so I just dropped out that day because I was never mind. So I went and I changed my major to mass communications, photographic arts, which is, I think, technically a photojournalism degree.
Interesting. And what, going from photojournalism, from high school portraiture and stuff like that to photojournalism, is quite a shift. What types of stuff were you making at that point?
Oh man. So I cannot speak highly enough of the photographic arts department program at the University of Central Oklahoma. I think that Jesse Miller and Mark Zimmerman, I think they were my professors. I think they're still there. And, they didn't just teach journalism. That was actually only a couple of the classes. They taught large format film. They taught commercial photography. They taught, I took a color theory kind of photography class. I took art, photography history classes, not just 35 millimeter, but also the large format, the 4x5. And then I did also take, news photography and things like that. I learned everything in that photo program. And I use it every single day. I hear Jesse Miller's voice in my head every single day. They prepared me for literally any situation. And I know a lot of people are under the idea that you don't need to go to school for photography, and you don't have to. But if you have the opportunity and the ability to, I highly recommend it. Like, I'm so thankful that I took those classes.
I think the thing, I mean, just to chime in, spoiler alert, I'm a college professor and I think there's value in college, but I think the thing that people have forgotten about the college process in general is that it's about becoming part of an ecosystem and being able to swim and be a part of every aspect of it, as opposed to like you go in, you learn the thing, you leave. And it's like if you step in and you're like, cool, I took my photography classes, they were okay. But if you're there and you're like, oh my God, I can do photojournalism, I can work with models, I can do experimental photography, I can focus on digital photography, I can like try different sort of development processes. And you're doing all that in a 2-year span.
Yeah.
Like you'll learn a lifetime worth of material in 24 months.
Yes. Yes. And like I said, I also, like, I was taking summer classes and I was taking more than 12 hours a semester because I was under that scholarship. So I was trying to get it all done, you know? Yeah. I took all of the electives. I took color photography. I took fashion photography. We learned some food photography. Like we did some night photography. Like I learned it all because I was just so hungry for it. And I wanted to be able to walk into any situation with my camera and at least have a chance of handling it correctly, you know?
I think you just described your entire career moving forward in like 2 sentences. Moving out of there, so obviously you've got like the Waters and Miller angels now on your shoulders,
right,
telling you what to do and what not to do. What were you doing when you made it out of college? This is the blank space I don't know about your history.
Oh, okay. So I think I knew pretty quickly that I was not going to survive in a quote unquote normal job. You know, when you graduate college, family that you maybe don't even remember that you have sends you a card in the mail with money in it, right? And I took all of that. I collected all of it. And I used my entire graduation gift money to pay for my first booth at a bridal show. And I got all of my friends, some that had been married, some that had never even dated anybody. We went out and we bought wedding dresses from the thrift store. I went out and I just built a wedding portfolio from scratch of all these styled photo shoots with these thrift store dresses. And or friends that I had been recently married and like had them put their wedding dress back on, you know. And I printed these out, I put them in frames, and I did my first bridal show the summer after I graduated, and I booked weddings. I booked not a ton, but like 5 or 6 of them, which was enough to give me a decent portfolio to start with of real weddings. I did wedding photography for 7 years in Oklahoma. I did hundreds and hundreds of weddings. I don't think a lot of people know that I have a massive wedding portfolio. I also was doing like senior portraits, family portraits, newborns, all of the things that were accessible to me that I could just post on the internet. Hey, I'm doing Mother's Day mini sessions, you know, and I would book a whole bunch of families for that and pay my bills with Mother's Day photos, you know?
Well, let's talk about, thank you for filling in the gap. That really helps. You know, like wedding photography is something that I don't think people really understand the nuance of the art form. You know, I mean, I think there's, everybody goes to like reality series Bridezilla in their brain.
Right.
Or like, it's the most beautiful day and like all the, you know, every shot of the bride and then I guess there's a couple of the groom and everybody else and maybe there's cake.
Right.
But like, tell us about, you know, you preparing and executing a wedding shoot. Like what types of things are you focused on and are you trying to amplify for the customer?
I just remember going through, like, looking through wedding albums of, like, my mom's weddings and, like, my aunt's wedding and, like, you know, looking through, like, I was a flower girl in my cousin's wedding and, like, flipping through their wedding albums, like, listening to them be like, oh, I forgot about that. Like, I'm so glad that there's a photo of this because I forgot that happened, you know? In my head, like, when I'm shooting for a wedding, I am aware of the fact that the bride is under so much stress that day and she's got so much anxiety and she's got so much going on that she's probably not taking it all in. And so I'm taking it all in for her because I want her to see that centerpiece that she paid $50 for that she never had time to go look at because she was running around the whole rest of the day. I want to make sure that I get a shot of her flower girls in the corner giggling about something because they're just children and they don't care that somebody's getting married, you know? Like, I am trying to take in all of the other moments that she either isn't aware of or isn't going to remember because it's such a special day and it's such a big moment in your life that you should be able to like have those memories forever, you know?
It's interesting just because, like, oftentimes when I talk with other wedding photographers or videographers, like, they feel their goal is to capture the perspective of the bride and the groom. And it sounds like yours is completely alternative to that. Like, you're obviously, you want them to be able to see and reflect what's going on, but, like, also just, like, understanding, like, there are so many blind spots in the way in which they're executing just this one big event that you can go in and you can be the one to save the day and make sure that they can see and salvage everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, and there's been multiple moments where, like, I did this one wedding. It was such a beautiful wedding. And the bride and groom were such lovely people. And I got these photos of the father-daughter dance. And, like, they were both sobbing the whole time. And I wasn't aware of why they were sobbing. I just knew that they were. And I was like, this is an important moment. Like, so I made sure to take special care. I always take special care of the father-daughter dance, but, like, extra special care this day, you know. And he ended up dying just a few months after the wedding. And I didn't know that he was sick. But I'm forever not necessarily a hero in that moment, but like I was able to gift her something that no one else could gift her, a piece of her dad to keep with her forever. That's more important to me than, oh, we got a good shot of the bride and groom cutting the cake. And I also do make sure to get a shot of the bride and groom cutting the cake, you know, but like it's not as important.
So you just said the sentence, I take special care of the father-daughter dance. And I'm curious, like, as a photographer and as somebody who's like focused on coverage or whatever, like, what does that mean? Like, how does your process change when you're recognizing, oh, this monumental thing is going to come up next?
Oh man, you're gonna make me cry. I'm gonna cry. Well, the father-daughter dance is especially personal to me because I lost my daddy like 11 years ago. And he was present at my wedding, but he was so sick by that point that he couldn't physically dance with me. And I just know how important it is for me to have those photos of me and my dad from that day. And I just, even if the bride's not thinking about it in that moment, she's going to think about it at some point. And she's going to be happy that she has those photos. And so I always make sure that I communicate with the DJ and the wedding planner so that I know what time these dances are supposed to happen, so that I make sure that I am present and that I have already tested my lighting, that I already know what's going on with the lighting on the floor. I already have my settings right, and I can just hit it running. And I'm not having to figure it out as I go.
Thank you for sharing that. I know that wasn't easy. In regards to your wedding business, like who were your clients? Were you primarily shooting around Oklahoma?
Yes. I have only done a handful of weddings since I moved to Syracuse because I got really burnt out. I actually don't do weddings anymore unless it's for like family or friends that I consider family. Because weddings are a lot of work. And if it's not for somebody that you love, if it's not for somebody that you care about, it's easy to get like jaded and to get bitter because like there are bridezillas, you know, they exist. If you're not taking care of yourself as a wedding photographer, you're going to burn out fast because it is one of the hardest things to do.
In regard, really technical, nerdy question. But in regards to you going and doing wedding shoots, were you setting up with multiple cameras? Like, did you?
No, it was always just me and just my camera. I always made sure I had a bunch of extra batteries for not only my flash but my camera, and I always made sure I had extra memory cards. But I never had a ton of money. I always had to work within my means, and so I never could afford a second camera. I also have the need to be in control of everything, so I also never really trusted a second shooter. But I was always, if you talk to any of my brides, like I managed to get all the coverage by myself. I wish that Fitbits were a thing back when I was doing weddings, to like know how many steps I would do, because I was always running. And like sometimes, because like during the ceremony, you don't want to run through the ceremony. So I'd be running around the outside, or I'd be running up and down the stairs, like in a church, like to get the different angles. And like, man, it was a workout.
I'm glad that you like had your Schwarzenegger years while you were doing your weddings. So switching gears a little bit, one of the things that you also had a passion for, through this time was, the works of Kevin Smith, the Tell 'em Steve Dave podcast, and you end up kind of becoming a part of the Tell 'em Steve Dave online community. Is that a fair?
You are about to have your mind blown. I actually was unaware of Kevin Smith until I met Tommy Lincoln and the Tell 'em Steve Dave universe. I did not grow up being a fan of Kevin Smith. I accidentally fumbled across the Tell 'em Steve Dave podcast. Did you ever watch Impractical Jokers?
I have not actually.
Okay. It makes me so uncomfortable. A lot of people ended up in the Tell 'em Steve Dave universe because they were Impractical Joker fans, and Q was one of the three on the podcast with Walt and Brian Johnson, who are from the Kevin Smith universe. I found Tell 'em Steve Dave because I was forced to watch Impractical Jokers against my will in a group setting, and it was so uncomfortable for me that to kind of give myself a barrier from embarrassment, I was on my phone and I was Googling all of these people, all the four of the Impractical Jokers. And, most of them were what you're expecting. But then when I got to Brian Quinn, when I got to Q, I think his IMDb was wrong. But at the time, what it said was comedian, firefighter, makeup artist, podcaster. And I was like, this guy is wild. Firefighter and a makeup artist? What the heck? And I was like, and I had never listened to a podcast before either. I was like, what's a podcast? And so I was so confused and interested in why Q was a comedian, firefighter, makeup artist that I started listening to his podcasts to try to figure it out. So I just picked a Tell 'em Steve Dave podcast at random. And the first one that I picked happened to start with an ad from Brian Johnson and his daughter Sage, and it was the Sagey and Dada show, and she was very young at this point, and it was like the cutest ad I had ever heard, and I was like bawling because it was so sweet. And so in that moment I was just sold, and I was sucked in, and I listened to the podcast and ended up falling in love in a very different manner than everybody else that was listening to that podcast. And so then I started making connections, and I started delving into that universe, and then figuring out the backstories for Walt and Brian. And that's kind of how I got into the Kevin Smith universe. And then I met Tommy Lincoln, and he's a big Kevin Smith fan. Now I'm a big Kevin Smith fan because I've watched all the movies, and I've gotten up to speed. But I did not start that way, no.
That's a really cool sort of backdoor way into this whole world, which quite frankly is for people who aren't really listening, who are what is the Kevin Smith universe? It's basically Kevin Smith makes Clerks in the 1990s and brilliantly creates some characters that are recurring, and then understands the media landscape, brings in his friends. We end up having reality TV shows like Comic Book Men and Impractical Jokers, and these things that all kind of morph together, so you can get kind of these quirky, fun stoner personalities demonstrating comedy and fun and connection in different ways. And it brings everybody in from different landscapes who are kind of looking for a way to just connect with things they're interested in.
Yeah.
So the fact that you didn't come in through like the traditional avenue, I think is just a testament to the fact that like this media landscape of the View Askew universe, or whatever you want to call the Kevin Smith universe, like was really successful.
Yeah. And it's so funny because it's like, he's known for like the pot jokes and like the kind of slightly off color comedy. And like what I love so much about it is how heartfelt everything is. Like I feel like that's kind of the undertone of everything he does is very heartfelt. I've met Kevin and I've met Jay, and they are just the kindest humans. I think that everything Kevin does is, he touches it with that kindness. And I think that the other stuff is just gravy,
Sure. Well, kudos to you for like, promoting kindness and allowing that to elevate. And then all of a sudden having that sort of heartfelt kindness completely upend your life, Jessica.
I know.
So from what I understand, you, within the Tell 'em Steve Dave podcast media landscape, there's a small female listener base that's roughly about 13%.
Right.
So you guys call yourselves the 13%ers. Mm-hmm. And you're going about your business, and some rando from Syracuse, New York says, yo, I'm creating graphics for all the 13%ers. Can I send you some? And that guy ends up being Tommy Lincoln, the owner of Stay Fresh Design.
Yeah. Yes. And actually, like when he first reached out, he asked for my email address because he wanted to send me this file, right? And I was like, no, thank you. I don't give out my personal information to strangers on the internet, which is such a funny thing since he's like my best friend now. Like I've known him for 10 years and he is my favorite human on the planet. And so like for our first interaction, to me being like, no, it's kind of but obviously I did end up giving him my email address after talking to some of the other 13%ers and realizing that he was not a creep. We became like online friends because like, how the internet will tell you when someone's active. And so I was always up late because I was, feeding a family of 4 on a photographer's income. And so I was always working really late nights, and I would be up at 3, 4 a.m. and be editing. And I would notice that the only other person who was also active on my friends list was Tommy Lincoln. And so I would be like, hey, what are you doing? Like, I'm, not alone but everybody was sleeping. Like, I was the only person awake in my house. And I was like, and I learned pretty quickly that he knew Photoshop. So I would be like, hey, I'm having this problem. Can't quite figure out how to do this. You're also awake at 3 a.m. You want to take a break and like talk me through how to do this thing in Photoshop? And so that's kind of how we became friends. That's how our like friendship grew.
That's amazing. And I love the fact that it's like, it's so based in like art and like it takes a village mentality. Like,
yeah.
We're going to support each other to like figure out these new techniques.
I learned a lot of Photoshop in college, but I've also learned a lot from Tommy Lincoln. So
I love it. So you guys end up connecting. Was it something about you were going to be in New Jersey?
Yeah. So we had friends that were also fans of this podcast who were getting married, and they were getting married in New Jersey because they met through the podcast. So they wanted to get married at the heart of the podcast, right? And they were having me photograph their wedding. And then they had Tommy designed some patches for them. I don't know if he also maybe did their wedding invitations, but he did some design things for their weddings, and he was going to be a guest. And so we met in person for the first time at this wedding. And while we were in New Jersey, he was already doing work for Tell 'em Steve Dave, and he was like, hey, they have some new merch items coming out that they need photos of. You're here. You have your camera. Do you want to come meet the guys and like do some photos for them? And like, of course I did. I was geeking out. Like, I was a fan of the podcast. I wanted,
And sorry to interject real quick. Were they one of his clients at this point? Okay.
Yes.
So he has that client relationship, and he's like, this is like your trial by fire.
Yeah. Yes. And so I did those photos, and then, shot the wedding, flew home. So that was in June or July. And then that following October, just a few months later, that same couple was like, hey, we could use some family photos can we fly you out to because they're from Canandaigua. They're like, can we fly you out to Syracuse to do some family photos for us at the 1911 orchard? And I was like, an orchard? I've never been in an orchard. Yeah, that sounds awesome. So then Tommy, we're all in the same friend group. So of course he knew I was coming. He was like, hey, while you're here, do you want to do some photos for Glazed and Confused? They were supposed to have their opening while I was there, but something happened and they ended up getting delayed. So I ended up doing photos of Tommy like painting the mural, painting the inside of the space. Yeah. So while I was there, I fell in love with Syracuse. He showed me around. I, met a lot of the other artists in town, and he was like, what are you doing in Oklahoma? He was like, if you, just saying, he's like, if you did want to move to Syracuse, we could find you work. Like, he was like, we could work together because I need a photographer and like my clients need photos. And I was like, honestly, that sounds amazing. I went home and I called a realtor and I went through all the steps to get my house on the market. And then as soon as it was on the market, it sold in 24 hours for more than asking price, cash. And I was like, if that's not a sign that I'm supposed to be in Syracuse, I don't know what is. 6 months later, from that October, I landed in Syracuse.
That's amazing. What was, so the thing Tommy and I have in common is that we will just eat, live, sleep, and bleed Syracuse. We're so proud of this town. But as an outsider, as an Oklahomie, what was it coming and seeing this town that made it so appealing for you?
It's hard to explain it. It's hard to put words to it. I know, I had an emotional reaction the second I stepped out of the airport. The second I was still in the Circle Drive of the Syracuse airport, and I could just smell the air and see the trees in the distance, and it was a little bit foggy. I started crying because it was something about the air was what I needed. And then everything is so green here. Everything's so green. In the spring, summer months, it's I feel in the summertime, I live in Fern Gully, and then in the wintertime, I live in Narnia, it's just so magical. And Syracuse, even though it is a pretty decent sized city, Syracuse does the cutest. They're a big city, but they act like they're a town. And they'll do the Taste of Syracuse, and they'll do little fests every weekend downtown Syracuse. And the mayor is always you always do the tree lighting and stuff. It's adorable. I feel Syracuse has such a sense of community, and the art scene. Obviously there is still cliques and politics. You can't get away from that anywhere. But in general, the art scene in Syracuse is so supportive of each other, and so it's such a community-based thing. Everybody, it's way less competitive than what I was experiencing in Oklahoma. It's a lot more hey, we're all in the same boat. Why don't we have a good time while we're here?
What kind of opportunities did you feel you did not have in Oklahoma that this was going to offer you?
I didn't really have any opportunities in Oklahoma. Everything that I was doing was, I was just finding other creatives and being hey, do you want to collaborate? I was getting paid for the weddings and that kind of thing. But anything that I wanted to do that was artsy fartsy or fashion, or nobody was getting paid. We were all just collaborating and doing TFP work. And then there wasn't a lot of opportunity to showcase smaller local artists in Oklahoma City. I think since I've left, they've started doing that. When I go back, I'm now you're doing it because I left, But when I was there, it wasn't there was one little art gallery that had a 3-year waiting list to get into that. Not only did you have to wait 3 years, but you had to be the best of the best, because they had so many people. And then the colleges would have art shows that would showcase the college student talent, and as somebody who had graduated, and there wasn't really anywhere for me to show that off other than the internet. Also Oklahoma's really weird about using locations as photo shoots. I would get told no all the time. But here, everybody in Syracuse is like, yeah, come into my shop, come into my place, take photos, like just tag me, I have not been turned down, I don't think once in Syracuse when I've asked, hey, can I do a photo shoot in your place? Where I was turned down constantly in Oklahoma. I got kicked off of a parking garage one time. The security guard told me that I was a threat to national security, right? I was just trying to do maternity photos like the Oklahoma City skyline.
That's really interesting because I do think that there's a welcoming aspect to Syracuse where it's kind of a blessing and a curse, but you go into a local business or you go into a public space and there's an inevitable you're one of us now, come on in, we'll take care of you. Which sometimes means that, the spaces are a little shabbier than maybe they could be if we were a little more exclusive.
Right.
But at the same point, I can't imagine as a business owner, I can't imagine somebody being I want to come and shoot in your arcade and us being nah, I don't think that's good for us. That just seems like bad business.
Yeah. Location scouting in Oklahoma was so difficult. I ended up just doing fields and, the forest and the lakes and, things like that because nobody would allow us to be inside their place of business.
Well, fascinating. So you end up coming here, and I know in another podcast you just recently Tommy talked about basically giving you a homework assignment to prove your worth to 1911.
Yeah.
But you ended up coming here and pretty quickly taking on 1911 as a client.
Yes.
And one of the things before we even talk about shooting that, I want to just applaud your mindset on this because I think one of the things that I love about your photography is the inherent chameleon-like aspect of you where it's you just shot weddings for 7 years where you had to make sure that you're collaborating and communicating with a bunch of different stakeholders to ensure you get the right shot at the right moment. And then you switch gears to coming here where it's all right, it's just me and some cardstock and some environments and a bunch of cans.
Yeah.
And let's see how this goes. That's such a different way to photograph.
It is. And it uses different parts of your brain. And in the beginning, it took me a while to remember that these cans can't turn themselves, that that I have to turn them to make sure that they're all facing the camera. Because, a human naturally turns to the camera. And so remembering to be very detailed in how all the cans were lined up and facing front. Because a lot of times I would I would take several photos and then be this can's not even looking at me. And so I have to start over,
I'm picturing the cans developing little personalities. You're oh, that one on the right's feisty.
Yeah. Oh yeah. All of the cans have personalities. Tommy gives them personalities,
So what was it like taking on 1911 as a client? It's a very different way of operating.
It is very different. And when I met Tommy, I hadn't done any product photography at all. And so his advice to me was to go out and to get some Prairie Artisan Ales cans and to shoot them in Oklahoma and to shoot them like I would a model. So I did that, and I was just from the very beginning, I was giving these cans personality. I was being okay, what is the flavor? What is not just looking at the can design, which is always a good indicator, but what are the ingredients? What is the background of this can? What is the personality of this beverage? Some of the bottles, Prairie Artisan Ales would have big catfish mouths on the top, just on the bottle caps. And I was oh, that's really interesting. And so I went and did some research and read into that. And so I ended up doing taking those out into one of the lakes and doing these really cool getting shots of them in the waves. There's this one that was had some critters, cats or I think they were fantastical creatures. I don't think they were real ones, but they were critters on the can. And so I went hunting and I found there's these spots of dried clay near one of the lakes that had animal bobcat prints in them. And so I laid the can down and next to those prints and photographed it there. I don't know. I just have always approached it with the mindset that there's a personality here, not just I need to make it look like a can.
Yeah, like I think, for people who haven't had the pleasure of seeing Jessica's artwork, shame on you. But like I just think about, how often when it comes to photography or whatever, like one thing I wanted to bring out in this interview is that like I don't consider you a photographer. I consider you like an art director who just isn't good at hiring other people to do jobs. Like, you're the art director who takes care of every aspect of the production.
Yes.
But equally, like what that also leads into is this idea that like, okay, where are people going to be drinking this? They'll either be drinking it while they're barbecuing or they'll be drinking it while they're at a bar. I'll take pictures of people barbecuing, drinking the beverage, or I'll take pictures of the can, with like some like water droplets on the side of it, on the side of a bar. Boom, I got my thing, which, as long as you understand your f-stop and your focal lengths and all those things, can be a really captivating way of photographing stuff. But like the idea that you came at this right from the get-go of like, I'm going to take these cans on a field trip, is of such a unique way of photographing, telling the story. And quite frankly, I think like whenever anybody hears, 1911, or Heirloom or any of these other products that you're thinking about, such minimal of it, of the memories or the ideas that we have actually relate to the environments they've created. Like so much of it relates to the environments you've created and the color palettes you've put on it and like the extra props you've put in there. It's such just a fantastic and just immersive way to think about product development.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. So like because if you just limit it to where are people going to be drinking these cans, you're going to be shooting the cans in the same spot over and over and over and over again. And 1911 has a pretty large library of flavors. And so you don't want to do the same photo shoot 17 times, And so I was always like, okay, so Tommy, like one of my favorite cans Tommy designed was the grapefruit can. And so I'm like, okay, what besides it tasting like a grapefruit, what else does this can say? Sometimes I try to pull on people's nostalgia. So this can, like the rosé can, the first one that he did, it was like kind of looked like grandma's wallpaper in her kitchen, And so I'm like, okay, so we need to like pull on the nostalgia of sitting in like your grandma's kitchen, or like playing with your grandma's like potpourri and stuff in her bathroom. And like, you don't necessarily drink a rosé can in your grandma's kitchen or like in her bathroom, but like you want people to have some kind of an emotional connection to the product that they're buying. Sure, it's good to let them know what the flavor is going to be. Like that's also important. You want to know what it's going to taste like when you buy it. But like there's several apple hard cider brands out there that, if you want just an apple hard cider, you have lots of options, So like, what are we going to bring that's different? Like, we know that this came from an orchard. We know that this tastes like an apple. You just got to give it, I don't know, something a little more special to be exciting. I'm always trying to give it a feeling. Like, I want you to feel something, not just imagine a flavor, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And if you don't mind, I want to get in the weeds a little bit more on this. Like, talking about grandma's wallpaper and, how that matches up with the design that Tommy created for the can, and then adding potpourri and things like that. You clearly spend a lot of time letting yourself mull over how you want to shoot the cans. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering if you can talk about that. And then I want to dig into the actual shooting of it. So let's start with this sort of like mental gymnastics that you do to come up with ideas for how to shoot these inanimate objects.
Okay. Yeah, so it's hard to put words to, but I'll try. One of the benefits of working with the designer that's designing the cans is that you kind of get to see his thought process and like what he's putting into it and like what are his thoughts on the can. And that's really helpful. A lot of times I'll go to him if I'm stuck on an idea and be like, well, what were you thinking? I will leave the physical product on my desk and I just talk to it. I let it talk to me, and I'm like, okay, is this can fun? Is this can high energy? Is it flirty? Is it playful? Or is this can more serious, more demure? Who is going to buy this can? Are college kids who are still have all of their taste buds and prefer sweet things? Like, are they buying this can? Or is this somebody who has already tried all of the hard ciders and is now looking for something a little more sophisticated? And so I let the can kind of tell me its personality, and then I go from there, and I'm like, okay, so this can is flirty. This can is high energy. What colors do I want to pull from this can? And one of the tricky things is like including the ingredients with the can, because sometimes the ingredients don't always fit the color palette that's on the can. So then you're like, okay, how am I going to like combine these ingredients that go into the flavor in a way that visually looks good? Because they taste good, but they don't always look good, right? And so you gotta like, sometimes I just pull the colors from the can itself, or sometimes I pull in complementary colors. I just pull in a color that I think is somewhere in the middle and makes sense with the can and the ingredients, And then like, I'll think about if this can were to be doing something, like if this can were a person and it did have a personality, what kinds of things would the can like to do? Is this can like really into putt-putt? Like, is this can like to go to amusement parks, Or is this can like really into like black and white old-timey movies? Is this can like really athletic and like likes to like do like paintball? And like, then depending on what I think the can as a person would want to do in its free time, I'll try to put it into that environment. Do you necessarily drink a can of hard cider while you're playing putt-putt? Not necessarily. But do you like to play putt-putt? And do you like to drink hard cider? Is me reminding you that you like to play putt-putt going to be like, oh, if I really like that, maybe I'll like this can. Maybe I'll like this cider,
I love that. Like, love that. Like, before we started recording, you and I talked about the idea that like there's just a beauty to still having like a childhood enthusiasm toward everything.
Yeah.
And being like, oh, that's really cool, and I learned this new thing, and blah blah blah. And I just really appreciate you dissecting that, because I don't, you sit there and you see the final product where it's, we're talking about 1911, but it could be food at Funkin' Waffles. It could be all these different things. But like, a viewer looks at that for a fraction of a second while they're scrolling, and it stays with them because of the amount of storytelling you've put into that.
Yeah.
Which is really cool. Part 2 is, let's actually talk about the nitty gritty of like setting up the shot and make it happen. So right now we're beaming in from Jess's studio, which is, I described it as the 1990s Ninja Turtles movie, Shredder lair, where I'm expecting kids to be skateboarding and like having a party, but we're on off hours, and there's a table in the corner with some lights and some cardstock and some 1911 beverages that are just sort of chilling. And that's the macroscopic creative, like, I don't know what I'm trying to say, set for these things. Tell us about like actually setting up the shots and like getting these cans to play nice.
Okay. Yeah. I use like poster board as my backdrops, because no matter what the flavor is, I am going to make a mess. Whatever I have as my backdrop is getting ruined. So I use poster board because, it's less than $1. And you can get it from Michael's, you can get it from Dollar Tree, you can get it from Hobby Lobby. You just throw it away afterwards, right? Usually how that goes is I have racks of different colors of poster board ready to go. And so a lot of times I will take the poster board out and I just leave it on the table for 5-10 minutes with the can on it, and I decide if I like that. Sometimes I do, and I go with it. Sometimes I don't, and I try a different color, We always buy lots of ingredients. We buy extra ingredients. If the flavor is black cherry, we buy a bunch of black cherries, right? Or the honey pear, we bought honeycomb. We bought just like honey bears. So I buy like multiple versions of the ingredient if they exist. So we also bought like fresh pears, but then we bought jarred pears. I'll buy multiples of everything and multiple versions. And when I'm buying these things, I don't necessarily know what I'm doing with them. I just know that I may use them, so we should have them. So then I put the cans on the backdrop. I make sure everybody's looking at me, eyes to camera. Make sure they're not rolling around. Sometimes you got to put something under it so it's not rolling off the table. And then I just start placing the ingredients. When you're creating a composition, there's rules of composition, and like everything has a visual weight. It's not necessarily indicative of its actual physical weight, because certain colors have more weight, certain textures have more weight. And so you want to make sure that your composition is balanced. So I move things around to make sure that everything's balanced and everything sits, and that your eye is going to move through the composition in a way that's nice. And I just play with it. Like I really just, before I even pull my camera out, I have tried several different compositions. I get it somewhere that I think is nice. I tend to like build. I'll start simple and then build and get more complicated as it goes, because it's easier to do that than to undo something. And especially if you're messing up your poster board, you get wet spots, and so if you start really heavy with a lot of ingredients, then you take them off, you're gonna have all these wet spots. So you start small and get bigger, and I'll do all the ingredient shots first, and then I'm like, okay, we got a good variety of these. And then I'll typically go into pouring or splashing or the really messy stuff, And really, I go until I have thoroughly ruined all of my backdrops and I don't have any more of that color. And then when we're out of backdrops and they're all ruined is when we're done.
And what's the time commitment of a shot like this? How long are you chilling with one of these cans?
A minimum of a half a day. Because you got to go buy all the ingredients, and then you have to set up your lights, you have to set up the backdrop. And then in between shots, if you did, I buy multiples of the backdrop because you mess it up. So then sometimes you have to clean everything up and set up again because you need to refresh your backdrop. I would say about 4 hours is average. Some of them, if it's got a lot more ingredients or it's a bigger product and I know that they're going to need more, if it's a bigger release and I know they're going to need more images, I'll spend more time than that.
Awesome. Well, speaking of time, I've spent a lot of time talking about inanimate objects, and I want to talk about one more before we talk about people. And that is you do a lot of other food photography as well.
Yes.
I was looking at your shots from Cake Bar. I was looking at your shots from Funkin' Waffle. I was looking at Oh My Darling. And I was curious about those shoots, whether or not I'm assuming you're going to their locations and you're pestering chefs. But
Yes.
what are those shots? What are those shoots like?
Well, it's different for everybody. Typically, I try to go when they're open, but when it's low traffic, because I don't want to inconvenience anybody, but I also don't want to be in the way. So I try to aim for usually 2 p.m. is pretty good because it's in between lunch and dinner. Sometimes I'll go before they open, but I try to get there we'll shoot for 30 minutes to an hour before they open so that I'm not asking their entire staff to be there wicked early, Sometimes the business owner wants to be more involved than others. Leanne from Oh My Darling, she really likes to, she's very creative herself. She's a dancer. She has a lot of creative energy. She loves to be involved in the photo shoots. And so she and I will kind of do them together, which is always great because I know I like her to be actually that chip is a little too curly. Can we get a different one? Other times Adam from Funkin' Waffles. I always love shooting at Funkin' Waffles. Adam he's such a funny character. And he really loves what he does, and he loves all the food. And the first time I shot with him, after we were done, he was like, "Now I want you to taste everything." It's like, "Once you taste everything," he's so proud of everything. And but when I shoot with Adam, their kitchen is pretty efficient, pretty fast, and he'll give me multiple plates at a time to shoot. And so I have a table full of stuff that I haven't shot yet and a table full of stuff that I still need to shoot, or that I have shot, that is ready to be packaged up or whatever. And those go pretty quick. One of the things that I think that I do that's different than most food photographers is that I like to keep everything edible. I don't love to do a lot of food waste. It makes me, I don't love that. So I try to make sure that I'm either using gloves or I'm not the one touching the food. And I don't do any of the tricks. Like, we don't use hairspray on our strawberries. We don't use engine oil as pancake syrup. Like, we use the real food because I want somebody to be able to eat it when I'm done. And I also just feel like it's a little more, like, I want to know that this is how the food's really going to look when I order it, you know? Like, at least be close. I don't want to create a fake image and then people order it and be like, this isn't what I saw. And so, like, there's always, like, kitchen staff is hungry, or, like, a lot of times we'll pack it up, take it home to my teenage boys, or, you know, a lot of times if we know we're shooting the entire menu and there's going to be a lot of food, we just invite people to come eat it afterwards because we don't want to waste food.
I love that. I was actually going to ask about whether or not you guys were using hairspray. So this is wonderful to know. And people must love shooting with you because it means there's always snacks at the end.
Yes, 100%.
So, moving forward, I don't know where you get your energy from, but you're constantly in the midst of a project. And dare I say, sometimes projects that take you an entire year to enjoy over the course of, let's say, October, where you do the 31 Days of Halloween, which for listeners at home who are unfamiliar, every year Jessica says that she's not going to do this project, and then she does it, which is where she sets up 31 different or more different photo shoots that are all horror themed or macabre themed, and then releases them one day, every day in October for the world to enjoy. And I'm curious if you can kind of tell us about the origin of the 31 Days of Halloween.
Yeah. So the origin actually was I just wanted to introduce myself to Syracuse. Like, the first year when I was here, you know, nobody really knew me. Nobody knew what I was about. Nobody was familiar with my work. And so I just wanted to do something fun and playful to kind of be like, hey, Syracuse, I'm here, you know, and to kind of get to know the local makeup artists and to know a lot of the local models. And, that was kind of the origin. I had done a little bit of that in Oklahoma, but it was not as welcome in Oklahoma, where here everybody is like into Halloween. So it's worked out really good. And so the first year it was just such a big hit that everybody was, after I had done the 31, I would have people contact me and be like, oh my gosh, next year, can we do this? Next year, can we do this? And that's what keeps me going, is like, it is a lot of work. And every year at the November 1st, I'm like, never again. We're not doing this again. But then people love it and they're so excited and they're always like, oh, it'd be a great idea. What if we did this? And everybody's like, can I be involved? And people love it so much. And that's what keeps me going back every year.
Well, I'm just putting this into the universe that we've talked about doing it, yes. Jessica. So there might have to be
I have talked to one of my makeup artists already.
Ooh, okay. Off the air, people. You guys aren't going to know what's going to happen. It's going to be great. So, I just love the variety of them. Like, I was looking at one today that was, I think, kind of like a woman who was like a witch in the forest. And then you've got, ones that are like bewitched, so like here's the witch motif used in like two very different ways. Ones where you've turned people into monsters, ones where you've had like almost like kind of like a funhouse dunce look at things. Like, there's such an array of stuff that I can't help but believe that, one, it's a ton of work, but two, it also, like, by the end of it, you end up discovering new ways to photograph things that you weren't anticipating.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And that's another reason that I do it, is that I always use it as an opportunity every year to learn something. I try to learn something with every photo shoot, but like, I get to use a lot of techniques and a lot of, imagery that like I don't get to use the rest of the year because it's not necessary, not everybody.
You don't do a lot of blood splatter with like burned dairy.
Right. Not everybody wants horror lighting for their dinner, so I play and sometimes I'll pick a theme just because it's like, I want to learn how to do this. I love the old timey horror movies where it was like practical effects, and so I'm like, ooh, how did they do this? And so I like to learn new types of lighting, and I like to learn like dry ice techniques and like there's different types of fog machines and different types of fog juice and like different ways to make blood. And because some of it stains, and you can make some that doesn't stain, and some of it goes in your mouth, and some of it you don't dare put in your mouth, All of October is basically one giant experiment. And I like to include other creatives too. I want them to have the opportunity to learn things, like my makeup artists and my hair artists and, my models. Like, I want them to be able to explore a side of themselves and a side of their work that they don't get to normally. I don't even remember what you asked me.
That's okay. Like, you brought up another question I had, which was so what I was asking you about was kind of how doing this challenge trains you for other projects or gets you thinking about other things.
Yeah. And so I learn a new technique every year, and even though like I'm using that technique for horror, I can take it and translate it into something else. And so it's like, okay, so I've learned about dry ice for the sake of a scary shot, but now I can take it and I can put it into an apple orchard, and I can use it for their Snapdragon, for the 1911 Snapdragon can. Now I've learned about this fog machine wand that I was using, but now I can use it for food photography, for something that needs to look hot. I'm learning things that I do end up taking into the real world with me.
One of the things that I was really curious about, and I think this might be a good place to put it in there, is about your in-camera tricks versus your Photoshop tricks.
Okay.
And I was curious about like how you make those decisions as to like, this is something where like it's just going to be all in lens, and then I'll just do like a few little touch-ups versus like I think I was looking at a photo, not to take the magic away, but I was looking at a photo for Oh My Darling where it was a woman who looked like she was throwing an orange in the air.
Yeah.
And after I looked at that, I was like, I'm pretty sure that was like a Photoshop composite.
No.
It was not.
Angelica actually, she did that several times, and she dropped it a few times, but we finally got it. Angelica's great. But there are, yes, like I do use, so sometimes an orange is easy because it looks like an orange from any angle, right? But sometimes, like the shots where somebody's tossing a can, the cans want to spin when they're in the air, and so getting the label to the front sometimes is impossible. Sometimes we get lucky and it is an in-camera shot, but sometimes it has to be a composite because the can just would not stop spinning. When it comes to like deciding what's going to be in camera versus what's going to be practical effects, a lot of those decisions come down to the safety of the model. Like Chloe wanted to be inside a claw machine. I knew that could potentially be harmful to the claw machine and also dangerous to the model. So I made the decision that we would turn that into a composite. Or sometimes I have a model that, for Halloween really wants to have these like demon eyes, but then their eyes are like sensitive to contacts, and it's going to like really hurt their eyes if they wear these weird contacts. So I make the decision, okay, I'm going to Photoshop this for you because I don't want you to be uncomfortable for the entire length of the shoot. I try to do as much in camera as I can, but there's times when it's just inevitable that you have to use some Photoshop. Like you're shooting a concert and there's, some drunk kid in the background puking, but the shot was great and it was in the moment, and like you can't redo that because it's happening IRL, and so you have to Photoshop out the drunk person in the background.
Awesome. Well, thank you for digging into that.
Yeah.
I wanna you've been remarkably gracious with your time, and we've gone through a lot of stuff, so I just a couple last minute things that I'm wondering about. One is that you've become pretty high profile in regards to working with like Kevin Smith, is who we talked about earlier, who I want to talk about again. But like, you're now regularly getting phone calls from Kevin Smith and Jason Mewes to be like, yo, we're going to be in this area. We want you to come to New Jersey to capture this thing. And I'm wondering just like how that feels to know that like your eye is the eye that these like very prominent people want to captivate them and to captivate an audience.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of unreal, honestly. Like, obviously I'm very grateful. And it's really wild. Yeah, it's awesome. I think that, one of the strengths that I have, it comes from a place of like, I am very self-conscious in front of the camera. I have some body dysmorphia myself. And so I'm very hyper aware of that for other people. And I take care of that. Like, if I notice that somebody is having an insecurity, I just, without asking them, will make sure that we don't emphasize that. Whereas I think that if somebody hasn't experienced that themselves, they will like not necessarily like keep it in mind. But everybody has insecurities. Everybody. Even the most confident people, even the people that like you see in front of the camera all the time, that, you know, like local models that like their career is modeling, they have things that they're insecure about. I always just take special care to make note of those things and to like make sure that I take care of them in the final image. You know, I think people tend to trust me with the image of themselves. Not necessarily that like these high profile people have these insecurities. I just think that me caring that they like their image is a strength of mine, if that makes sense.
It does. It's interesting in the sense that, like, of Kevin Smith, like he puts on a ton of weight. He's a very large person to the extent where, like, you know, he sometimes needs to buy 2 plane seats in order to travel. Ends up having a heart attack. Ends up losing a ton of weight, going vegan, and is like, you know, like I say this in a positive way, like a shell of his former self. And you know, I heard a story about like you going and doing a photo shoot with him and him approving every image you submitted,
Yeah.
which is unheard of in any sort of like Hollywood context.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know, having been plus size my whole life, I mean, without him speaking to me about it, without knowing for a fact, I just know like he probably does have some insecurities. And so without speaking about it, without like acknowledging it, I just make sure that when I'm photographing him, I'm using a lens and an angle that is known to be universally flattering. You know, I'm like not trying to get the weird angle so that it's a unique image, if that makes sense. You know, I'm not trying to like show off and be like, oh, I can give you something new, and like trying to get like these other strange angles. I'm like, I'm just going to go to the ones that I know are flattering, you know?
I love it. So I saw, and I apologize, I have one more probably lengthier question, but you know, I was going through your feed and I was researching things, and I want to see if we can bring a few other high profile you know, clients your way. I saw one of them is that you want to do a shoot with Michelle Obama.
Oh yes, I would love to photograph Michelle Obama. She is just so beautiful and like magnetic and powerful. Like Annie Leibovitz did some cover photos of Michelle Obama, and like they were just so stunning. They're so stunning. And ever since those photos came out, I was like, I want to do that. I want to shoot Michelle Obama.
Who else is on your short list of like, let's make this happen, let's will this into the universe? Who else would you want to photograph?
Oh man, Trixie Mattel. She's one of the most famous drag queens in the world right now. And she just is like so much fun. Really, any drag queen that's been through RuPaul's Drag Race would be a lot of fun. Allison Harvard, she was on a couple seasons of America's Next Top Model, and she has like these really like large doe eyes, and like she's capable of these like really like hauntingly beautiful, like ethereal kind of images, and I think she would be a lot of fun to photograph.
Awesome. So my last technical question, I promise, is we promised to talk about color theory, and we haven't colored this yet. And one of the things I'm curious about is the way in which you make choices about the colors that you'll implement into a model shoot based off the actual just natural physique or traits of a model. Like, this is something I've always been really curious about.
Yeah. So, I mean, color theory, everything touches color theory. Like, all of the other subjects you learn about in school are involved in color theory. Like, you've got the science of how the eyeball works and perceives, and how your brain perceives color, and how light reflects and refracts. And you've got the math of like how, like, you add 50% red and 50% yellow and you get orange. Like, there's math in those things. And then you have literature, symbolism, and different colors meaning different things, you know. And then you have like history and like, you know, like blue and like Cleopatra and how she like wore the blue eyeshadow, and like colors meaning different things throughout history. And there's a lot going on in my head every time I'm thinking about a color and like my choice in color. When it comes down to just like what's the most flattering for a person, you know, they all have like, everybody has like an undertone in their skin. I will try to like look at their eye color and pick a color that I know will pull out the dominant color or the secondary color in their eyes. Or, you know, what are they wearing? What is the outfit that we're wearing today? Like, what is gonna complement? I guess it's like I have to decide, what are we highlighting today? Are we highlighting their natural features? Or are we highlighting the makeup? Or are we highlighting the outfit? And then pull in my knowledge of color theory, because I took 3 color theory classes in college.
And you've tested it every single day you've ever picked up a camera in your life.
Thank you. Yes.
I love it. Are there any, in regards to like specific palettes that you just love to work with? Are there specific ones that you just can't get away from?
I just love to play. I like to use color in ways that like are not necessarily expected. I like to be obnoxious with color. I like to just use too much of it. I don't know. I love them all. I love all of them. I couldn't pick a favorite.
Sweet. So we've spent a long time and a lot of time talking about your obsessions and your crazy thought procedures and your photography. And I want to just end this talking about balance. What do you do to ensure that you don't burn yourself out creatively? Like, what do you do to make sure that you create a healthy headspace for yourself and you remain enthusiastic about the work?
I just make sure that I'm having fun. And if something isn't inherently fun in itself, I find a way to make it fun. Like, I have to edit these tedious photos of just, you know, e-commerce merch on white, and it's so tedious and it's taking forever, and I have a million of them. So I'm going to pick a podcast. I'm going to put on a podcast, or I'm going to have a glass of wine, or I'm going to get myself a treat, you know? And so I find something that brings me joy to bring it in to whatever I'm doing, so that, sure, this sucks and this is boring, but I've saved up 5 episodes of this podcast that I have to listen to. So, but a lot of what I do is fun. And so I just make sure to pay attention to that and to like soak it in and to enjoy it while it's there. Because if you're not having fun, what's the point, right?
I love it. What are your hobbies outside of photography?
I honestly don't have a ton, because I'm a mom, and like my boys have hobbies and like they go to school, and, you know, so if I'm not at work, I'm a lot of times being a mom. But I do enjoy good true crime podcasts or documentary. I also, you know, I just like to be outside. Like, I don't necessarily even have to be doing anything, but I like to sit by the water. I like to throw rocks in the lake, like to, you know, go on a hike, soak in the sunshine.
Well, thank you for letting us soak into your artwork as well. For those who are interested, where can they find you on the internet?
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at jessica.stayfresh. Also can follow stayfresh.design on Instagram. I have a Facebook, but honestly, I just put everything into Instagram and tell it to also post to Facebook. So I'm not really on Facebook. I think that's about it.
Cool. And then I always want to save room at the end of the show if there's anything that we haven't covered that's sort of on your brain, or anything we haven't talked about. Anything that you want to throw out there?
Oh, geez. I don't think so. I think we talked about a lot.
Cool. Well, Jessica, thanks for making amazing art, and thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. I'm so bad at sign-offs. Like, every time I get off the phone or like into Zoom call, like every single Zoom call I do ends with, where's the end button? Where's the yeah.
So this will be the moment in a Zoom call where we're both going over with our mouse to the end call button.
Yeah.
And it'll just inevitably just cut.
Yeah. I'm real bad at sign-offs. I'm sorry.
I have to tell you that interviewing Jessica was an absolute pleasure, but just being in her studio, hearing her stories, and being able to envision the way she morphs the space based on every project was truly just an inspiring activity. So, Jessica, thanks so much for being on the show. And for listeners out there, I strongly encourage you to go and check out Jessica's work, no matter how familiar you are with it, and just think about the storytelling that she's accomplishing with all of her photos, with her animate and inanimate subjects. It's truly a remarkable thing. And go check out Stay Fresh in general and see the amazing things they're doing for the art community in Syracuse. Moving ahead, on May 21st, we have episode 48 with Corey Trench. Corey is a film and TV editor based in Los Angeles. He started off working as a production assistant on Parks and Recreation and then became a full-time video editor working on such shows as Teen Wolf and Krypton, two cult favorites. Most recently, he's worked on Leverage, Redemption, and Almost Paradise. But this is going to be an amazing look into the way in which Hollywood works and the way in which the editing industry has basically become sort of the backbone of post-production, making sure that everything flows smoothly between the different systems that are happening. So if you are somebody who loves television and movies and wants to know more about what's happening behind the scenes, listen to Corey Trench talk about it on Meditations, episode 48, dropping on May 21st. Equally, if you're looking to, just get some new narratives in your brain while you're waiting for the next episode to drop, there is a ton of cool stuff that has happened on this podcast. On episode 45, I was lucky enough to interview Daniel Handler, who many of you may know as Lemony Snicket, the writer of the Series of Unfortunate Events books and one of the main writers on the Netflix TV show. On episode 43, I had Laura Hall on the show, the music director and piano player for Whose Line Is It Anyway? On episode 36, I had writer Gregory Maguire, the writer of Wicked, which was turned into one of the biggest films of the year. Episode 34, we stay in the Stay Fresh neighborhood with Tommy Lincoln, Jessica's best friend and collaborator, if you want to hear about that working relationship from his point of view. And on episode 33, I was lucky enough to talk with Joel Capolongo, the owner of Strong Hearts Cafe, an all-vegan eatery based in Syracuse, New York, with a second location in Buffalo. There's a ton of stuff happening in the back catalog, so if you're somebody who needs some new stories in your life or just wants to hear from other creatives, go check out some previous episodes of Meditations with Ryan Zlomek. As always, I so appreciate you listening. If you like what you're hearing, please go write a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or anywhere where you listen to your podcasts. You can follow my work, The World of Ryan Zlomek, on Facebook, or you can find me at Ryan Zlomek on Instagram, Blue Sky, and TikTok. But whatever you do, please go through the rest of your day spreading cheer to others. Make sure that you find your own creative self and let it come out, and make space for conversation because you just might learn something. Stay awesome, stay fresh, have an awesome day.